Story 1, Whispering Pines. The first time I heard the whispers, I thought it was just the wind. Midnight shifts as a park ranger can play tricks on you, especially in the deep woods of northern Montana. The trees there are impossibly tall, and when the wind moves through them, it sounds like low voices having a secret conversation. On that particular night, the moonlight was thin and silver, and the forest floor smelled of cold pine and damp earth. I remember pulling my jacket tighter, my flashlight barely cutting through the thick darkness. I was patrolling a trail called Cedar Loop, a path known to be quiet even during the day. Campers often avoided it after dusk because of the wildlife black bears, mostly, and the occasional mountain lion. My radio crackled softly at my hip, but no one else was scheduled to check in for another hour. It felt like I was the last person awake in the entire park, a small island of breath and heartbeat in an ocean of trees. The sound began as a faint hum, almost like someone exhaling in slow motion. I paused, lifting my light toward the tree line. Nothing moved. No wind, no animals, only that strange, breathy vibration. I called out a cautious hello, and instantly regretted it. The sound stopped dead, leaving the forest unnervingly silent, as if even the insects were holding their breath. I started walking again, but the sense of being watched grew heavier with each step. You know that prickle at the back of your neck when you reassure someone is behind you? It was like that, sharp and constant. My boots crunched the frost-hardened soil louder than usual, or maybe it just felt that way in the quiet. I tightened my grip on the flashlight until my knuckles ached. Then came the whisper. Clear this time, a voice, soft but distinct, sliding through the trees. Don't look back. My legs froze. I hadn't imagined it. Those words were real, close enough that I swore I felt the breath on my ear. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The flashlight trembled in my hand, its beam shaking across the trunks like a nervous heartbeat. Finally, I forced myself to turn. Nothing. Only endless black forest, shadows tangled like spider webs. I spun in a slow circle, heart pounding so hard it hurt. My radio hissed suddenly, a burst of static that made me flinch. A voice came through, barely a whisper. Stay with us. I yanked the radio from my belt, expecting to see an open channel. But the screen was dark, completely off. My breath turned to fog in the freezing air as I tried the power button. Dead. The battery had been full an hour earlier. I decided to head back toward the ranger station, forcing myself into a brisk walk. The path felt longer than usual, each turn unfamiliar, as if the woods had rearranged themselves while I wasn't looking. The whispering began again, faint, but everywhere at once. I couldn't tell if it came from ahead, behind, or inside my own head. Branches snapped to my left. I swung the light toward the sound, catching the brief shimmer of something pale between the trees. A face, maybe, or just the moonlight on bark. The whisper rose to a hiss. Closer. My chest tightened as if invisible hands were pressing inward. I broke into a run. My boots slipped on damp leaves, my breath burning in my throat. The path twisted and branched in ways I didn't remember. Every tree looked the same, their trunks like black columns. Behind me, soft footfalls matched my pace, never gaining, never fading. I stumbled over a root and fell hard, my flashlight skidding away. Darkness swallowed everything. The whispers gathered around me like a storm, countless voices murmuring in overlapping tones. Some laughed softly, some wept. One repeated, over and over, "You found us." Scrambling to my feet, I lunged for the flashlight. It flickered weakly as I shone it ahead. A figure stood in the beam, only a few feet away. Tall, thin, draped in something that looked like moss or tattered fabric. I couldn't see a face, just the outline of a head, cocked unnaturally to one side. I shouted, "Who are you?" The figure didn't move. My voice sounded too loud, swallowed almost instantly by the trees. Then, in a dry, rustling tone, it said, "You shouldn't be here." The flashlight blinked out. Total darkness again. I spun and ran, blind branches whipping my arms and face. My lungs screamed. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed distance. The forest seemed endless, the air thick and cold, but somehow I broke through to the gravel road leading to the station. It's only when I saw the dim porch light of the ranger cabin did I slow down. My whole body trembled as I grabbed the door handle. Inside, the radio on the desk crackled to life, perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. The clock on the wall read 12:03 a.m. I'd left the trail at midnight. I sat there for a long time, staring at the silent radio, trying to steady my breathing. Eventually, I convinced myself it had to be exhaustion and an overactive imagination. That is what I told the other rangers the next morning when they asked why I looked like I hadn't slept. But when I went back to Cedar Loop with a partner at dawn, something stopped me cold. On a fallen log, near where I dropped my flashlight, there were deep scratches forming a single word: stay. My partner swore they weren't there the day before. We both stood in silence, the morning sun filtering through the branches, the forest perfectly calm. Yet I could almost hear the faintest whisper, carried on the breeze, like a promise I'd never forget. I've worked many midnight shifts since then, but I never patrolled Cedar Loop alone. And whenever the wind moves through the pines just right, it sounds like voices, soft, patient, waiting. Sometimes I wonder if they're still calling for me. Sometimes I think I can hear them answer when I whisper back. Besides, when I'm out there past midnight, I swear I feel that cold breath on the back of my neck again. Story to Lantern Lake disappearance, the night started quietly. A calm shift at the park's east entrance near Lantern Lake. The air was crisp, and the water reflected a silver slice of moon that made the whole scene look almost peaceful. I remember thinking it would be an easy night, just a few campers, maybe a late fisherman heading back to his truck. Around 11, I brewed a cup of strong coffee in the tiny ranger station and stepped outside to breathe in the pine-scented cold. That's when I heard the faint splash from the direction of the lake. It wasn't unusual to hear fish breaking the surface, but this sound was heavier, like someone wading through water. I grabbed my flashlight and started along the narrow path that curled down to the shore. The woods were silent, except for the occasional pop of a settling tree. My boots crunched the frozen leaves as I walked, the beam of light bobbing over roots and stones. A low fog was beginning to creep across the water, blurring the far bank into a pale smear. Halfway down the trail, I noticed something odd, teeny glimmers of blue light dancing near the lake's edge. They weren't like fireflies. They pulsed slowly, almost in rhythm. My first thought was that some campers had set up strange lanterns for night fishing, but there were no voices, no clatter of gear, just the quiet ripple of water in those eerie floating lights. When I reached the shore, the blue orbs seemed to hover a few inches above the surface. I could see the lake bed through the clear shallows, stones gleaming like coins under moonlight. The lights pulsed again and began to drift farther from shore, as if inviting me to follow. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer, the cold mud sucking at my boots. That's when I saw the footprints, bare human footprints leading into the water, pressed deep in the mud. They were fresh as crisp, as if someone had walked into the lake only minutes earlier. The size looked like an adult man's, though a few smaller prints, maybe a child's, followed alongside. My heart tightened. We had no families registered to camp that night. I clicked my radio to call the main station, but static answered. The signal should have been strung by the water, yet only a soft hiss filled the speaker. I tried again, calling out my location, but the static only deepened into a strange, low hum, almost like a distant chant. A sudden splash broke the silence. My flashlight whipped toward the sound, catching a ripple 20 feet out. The blue lights winked out all at once, leaving only the pale reflection of the moon. Something large moved beneath the surface, the water swirling unnaturally. I scanned the dark water, pulse racing, but nothing broke the surface again. I took a careful step back as the air felt heavier, charged like the moments before a thunderstorm. When I heard the voice, a woman's voice, faint and melodic, singing a tune I didn't recognize. It floated across the lake like smoke, distant but clear, a slow, mournful melody that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Hello?" I called, my breath misting in the cold. "Are you okay?" The singing stopped. For a moment, the lake was utterly silent. Then a whisper came from directly behind me. "Stay with us." I spun around, my lights slicing through empty air. Nothing, no one, only trees stretching into darkness. Turned back to the water just as something pale surfaced. A face, no, a mask white and smooth eyes, completely black. It floated for an instant before sinking soundlessly. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight, my chest tightening as adrenaline flooded through me. I forced myself to run, boots slipping on wet leaves. The trail twisted in the dark, each step echoing like a drumbeat in my ears. Behind me, the singing resumed softer now, but somehow closer, as if the voice were inside my head. At the halfway point, a blue glow bloomed to my left. Through the trees, I glimpsed the orbs again, drifting at eye level, weaving between trunks. They moved with purpose, keeping pace with me, their light flickering in hypnotic patterns. I broke into a sprint, lungs burning. The forest seemed endless, the path unfamiliar despite years of patrols. Branches clawed at my jacket. I could still hear that melody, gentle, pleading, urging me to turn back. Finally, the ranger station's porch light appeared through the trees. I burst inside, slamming the door and locking it with shaking hands. The radio on the desk, which had been dead minutes before, crackled to life with normal chatter from the main office. My watch read 12:14 a.m., though it felt like I'd been gone for hours. I reported the incident, but when a search team arrived at dawn, the lake was calm and empty. No footprints, no lights, not even a ripple disturbed the glassy surface. The mud where I'd seen those tracks was untouched, smooth as if nothing had ever stepped there. Later that morning, an older ranger pulled me aside. He looked uneasy as he told me a story from decades earlier, a family of 3 who vanished while night fishing on Lantern Lake. Their boat was found drifting, gear untouched, but no bodies were ever recovered. Some locals claimed they still heard the mother singing on certain foggy nights. I laughed it off for his sake, but inside I felt a cold knot tighten. The melody I'd heard still played in my mind, clear as a memory. Now, every time I patrol near Lantern Lake, I keep my distance from the shore after dark. Yet sometimes, when the fog rolls low and the moonlight turns the water silver, I swear I see faint blue lights flicker across the surface. And if I listen closely, I can still hear that gentle song calling from the mist, waiting for someone else to follow. Story 3 Watcher on Raven Ridge. The trail up Raven Ridge is steep and lonely. A rocky climb through pine and aspen that feels like the edge of the world. It's been assigned to monitor a small fire lookout cabin near the summit, a place most rangers avoid after dark. Locals whisper about strange lights and sudden winds up there, but I'd always chalked it up to superstition. That night, a pale autumn moon hung low, painting the boulders silver as I hiked with only a radio and my flashlight for company. By the time I reached the cabin, the air was so still, it seemed to muffle my own footsteps. Inside, the wood stove was cold, and a single, dusty window looked out over an endless sea of treetops. I set my gear down and checked the weather instruments. No signs of storms. Just a crisp night with scattered clouds. For a while, I sat listening to the creak of the old timber frame and the faint hiss of wind slipping through the seams. Around midnight, a rhythmic tapping pulled me from a half-doze. It sounded like someone drumming fingertips against glass. The only window faced a sheer drop, 20 feet above the ground. My skin prickled as I aimed the flashlight toward it. Nothing, just my own reflection staring back. I told myself it was a loose branch knocking in the breeze, though the air outside remained perfectly still. Then came the crunch of footsteps on gravel, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. I killed the light and strained to listen. Each step seemed measured, pausing as if whoever it was wanted me to know they were there. My radio stayed silent, despite my whispered calls to the main station. The signal should have been strong, but the line was dead. A shadow slid across the window, tall and narrow, gone before I could blink. Kai grabbed the cabin's heavy door latch and held it tight, heart pounding. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a low humming no tune I recognized. Just a single note that vibrated through the floorboards like a distant engine. I flicked the flashlight back on, sweeping the room. Empty. The humming ceased. A sudden knock, 3 sharp raps, made the window shudder. I lunged forward, shining the beam outside. The rocky ledge below was bare. No ropes, no ladder, nothing a person could stand on. For long minutes I waited, barely breathing. Then I saw it, a figure perched on a boulder about 30 yards away, perfectly still. The moonlight outlined a long coat flapping in the wind I couldn't feel. Its face was hidden beneath the brim of a wide hat. The figure raised one arm in a slow, deliberate wave. I should have radioed for help, but I was frozen, locked in a stare I couldn't break. After what felt like an eternity, the figure lowered its arm and tilted its head back, revealing a pale, featureless face, no eyes, no mouth. Just smooth skin glowing faintly in the moonlight. My stomach flipped. I turned to grab my pack, but the cabin door rattled violently, as if someone outside was trying to force it open. Wood groaned under the strain. I shoved my shoulder against it and held on, every muscle trembling. Then, silence. When I dared to look back through the window, the figure on the boulder was gone. The forest below stretched empty and black, the moonlight cold and sharp. I kept the flashlight pointed at the door until my arm ached, afraid to even blink. A sudden whisper came from behind me. "You shouldn't have come alone." The voice was right next to my ear. I spun around, beam sweeping every corner. Nothing but the stale smell of old wood and cold ash from the stove. I backed toward the door, desperate to leave, when a single knock echoed from inside the walls themselves. 3 slow, deliberate raps from nowhere. My breath caught as the sound moved along the wall to the ceiling, then to the floor beneath my boots, as if something crawled within the timber. Gripping the flashlight like a weapon, I flung open the door and dashed into the night. The trail back down, twisted through jagged rocks, moonlight barely guiding my frantic steps. Behind me, the humming resumed, distant but steady, following me down the ridge. Every few minutes, I glanced back. Again, each time I caught a flicker of movement among the trees, a tall silhouette, keeping pace without effort, always just beyond the reach of my light. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop until the Ranger Jeep came into view at the trailhead. Once inside, I locked the doors and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, but before I drove off, a shape stepped into the road ahead. It was the same figure, hat low, face smooth and glowing faintly. It raised its arm again in that slow, mocking wave. I slammed the accelerator, swerving around it. In the rearview mirror, the road behind was empty, no figure, no shadow, only the winding path gleaming under the moon. Back at the main station, the radio worked perfectly, every channel clear. I filed a brief report about strange noises, leaving out the rest. No one would believe me, and maybe part of me wished it was just exhaustion playing tricks. But some nights, when the wind drops to nothing and the forest holds its breath, I still hear that low humming echoing in the distance, like a warning carried on the cold mountain air. and whenever I glance at the dark ridgeline, I half expect to see a tall figure waiting, hat brimmed low, arm raised in a slow, patient wave. Story 4, Silent Campground. The old North Hollow campground had been closed for years after a series of unexplained accidents, but rangers still checked the area to keep trespassers out. One foggy October night, I drew the short straw and had to patrol it alone. The entrance gate hung crooked, chains rattling lightly, though the air was dead still. My headlights caught the faded sign, closed for renovation. Everyone knew no renovations were ever planned. I parked near the ranger's shed and stepped into the cold mist. The smell of wet leaves and rusted metal filled the air. My flashlight cut a weak path across picnic tables, collapsing under moss. Tall pines loomed like silent guards, their needles dripping from an earlier rain. The quiet was absolute. No birds, no insects, just the muffled crunch of my boots. As I walked deeper among the abandoned campsites, I saw a faint orange glow flickering through the trees. Campfire. Impossible. Nobody was registered here. My heart picked up as I followed the light. Radio at the ready. The trail wound past rotted benches and a broken water pump, every shadow stretching unnaturally long in the fog. The glow grew brighter until I emerged into a clearing. In the center stood a perfectly built fire, flames licking high and steady. But no one was around. No footprints, no gear, not even a stray log dragged from the woods. The fire crackled warmly, yet the surrounding air felt icy. I called out, "Hello, park ranger." The sound vanished into the fog as though swallowed. Circled the fire, looking for signs of kindling or matches. Nothing. It was as if the fire had sprung up from the earth itself. My radio hissed when I tried to report in just static, sharp and loud. Then I noticed the smell. Not wood smoke, but something metallic, like burning copper. My eyes watered as the flames shifted color, glowing a deep, unnatural blue. The ground beneath me trembled lightly, a subtle vibration through the soles of my boots. A soft laugh echoed from the tree line, childlike and close. I swung the flashlight toward the sound, catching only thick fog. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. The laugh came again, this time behind me, though I hadn't heard a single footstep. I backed away from the fire. The blue flames flared higher, casting strange shadows that danced like figures on the trees. The laugh turned into a low whisper. "Stay and play." It came from everywhere at once, weaving through the mist. Something moved at the edge of the clearing, a shape barely darker than the fog. It seemed small, maybe the height of a child, but impossible to focus on. Each time I blinked, it shifted, closer than before. My chest tightened as adrenaline surged. I turned and bolted down the path, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly. Behind me, the laughter grew louder, layered with other voices, dozens of them, all overlapping in a chilling chorus. The ground felt soft, almost spongy, as if the earth itself were breathing beneath my feet. Branches whipped at my arms, fog thickening until I could barely see a yard ahead. I thought I heard footsteps matching mine, light and rapid, but every glance over my shoulder revealed only empty mist. My radio remained dead, spitting static like faint whispers. The trail split unexpectedly, two paths where I remembered only one. I chose the left without thinking, heart hammering. The laughter stopped suddenly, replaced by a deafening silence that felt heavier than the noise. After what felt like miles, I stumbled into another clearing only to freeze in horror. It was the same fire, the same circle of mossy logs, flames still burning blue. I had run in a full circle. The clearing looked unchanged, except for one detail. A small wooden doll sat on a log, its head turned toward me. The doll's painted eyes seemed to glint in the firelight. I stepped back and my boot struck something soft. Looking down, I saw more dolls half buried in the damp soil. Dozens of them, each carved with eerie precision. A whisper drifted from the fire. Stay forever. The dolls' heads tilted slightly. All at once, as though acknowledging the voice. I felt a cold rush of panic and sprinted toward the opposite side of the clearing, crashing through underbrush I didn't care to identify. This time, I didn't follow a path. I just ran, lungs burning, until the fog began to thin. Finally, the silhouette of the ranger's shed appeared through the trees. I stumbled toward it, slamming the door behind me. The moment I crossed the threshold, the radio crackled back to life, clear and calm. I called in a garbled report. Backup arrived within 20 minutes. When they followed me back to the clearing, the fire was gone. No ashes, no logs, not even a scorched patch of earth. Only the damp ground and the faint smell of copper remained. My colleagues teased me, saying I'd let the dark play tricks on me. I laughed weakly, but inside I knew better. The dolls weren't my imagination. I could still feel the imprint of one beneath my boot. Now, whenever fog rolls through North Hollow, I avoid that side of the park. Sometimes on windy nights, I swear I catch a faint child's laugh carried through the trees. And I tighten my grip on the radio, hoping it stays alive, 'cause if it ever goes silent again, I fear I might hear those whispers calling me back to the blue fire, inviting me to stay and play forever. Story 5, Shadow in Black Hollow Gorge. Black Hollow Gorge was the part of the park everyone avoided after sunset. The cliffs, they rose like jagged teeth, and the trail wound so narrowly that even daylight felt uneasy. I'd drawn the late shift to check for rock slides after a week of heavy rain. By dusk, the sky was bruised purple, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and pine. I told myself it was just another patrol, but a quiet dread settled in my chest the moment I stepped onto the trail. The path clung to the gorge wall, a slick ribbon of gravel. My flashlight beam barely reached the rushing creek far below. Each step echoed strangely, as if the gorge itself swallowed sound and returned it hollow. After the first mile, I noticed how the usual night chorus frogs, insects, the distant cry of owls was absent. Only the dull roar of water remained, like a warning. Half an hour in, a sharp crack split the silence. I froze, sweeping the light across the cliffs. A rock slide, maybe, but the sound hadn't come from above. It came from the path behind me, where nothing moved. My radio hissed as I tried to call in, but static drowned every word. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching on wet gravel. I turned fast, flashlight slicing through the mist. Empty trail. The footsteps stopped as soon as my light reached the bend. My skin crawled as I waited, heart pounding in the eerie quiet. I pressed on, walking faster, but the footsteps started again, always just behind the curve of darkness. Whoever it was matched my pace perfectly, never closer, never farther. The gorge walls funneled the sound, so I couldn't tell the distance, only that I wasn't alone. The trail narrowed to a thin ledge. I hugged the rock face, trying to steady my breath. That's when I saw a shape a head tall, motionless, blacker than the surrounding night. For a second, I thought it was a tree trunk until it shifted slightly, as if turning to face me. My flashlight flickered, the beam dimming to a sickly yellow. In that weak glow, I saw two faint pinpricks of red where eyes might be. They blinked once, slow and deliberate. I stepped back instinctively, heel skidding on the gravel. The figure didn't move, but the air grew heavy, a pressure in my ears like descending deep underwater. I forced myself to speak. "Park Ranger, who's there?" My voice cracked in the gorgeous emptiness. The figure tilted its head, and a sound like a deep exhale rolled through the canyon, though no wind stirred. Then the lights those red pinpricks vanished. Total darkness swallowed the trail. My flashlight went dead, leaving only the distant roar of the creek. Kay fumbled with spare batteries, hands trembling, when a whisper slid across the rock walls. "Why are you here?" I spun, the voice too close to be an echo. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. When I finally flicked the light back on, the path ahead was empty. But new footprints, large, bare-marked the wet gravel, pointing toward me. I backed away, eyes darting to the drop-off at my side. Each backward step was met with a soft crunch ahead, as if something invisible mirrored me. The pressure in my ears deepened, and I swore I felt a cold breath on my cheek. Then, a flash of movement, shadow leaping from one cliffside to the other, impossibly far. The sound of scraping rock followed, echoing like claws on stone. I broke into a run despite the treacherous trail, heart racing with every slippery step. The gorge seemed endless. My flashlight beam danced wildly, catching glimpses of movement, dark shapes darting along the walls above me, keeping pace. A low growl rumbled through the canyon, vibrating the gravel underfoot. I stumbled on a loose stone and nearly pitched over the edge. As I scrambled upright, I looked up to see the figure again, now atop a boulder ahead. Its eyes glowed brighter, crimson and steady, watching without blinking. It raised one long arm and pointed toward the abyss. My stomach twisted as a gust of icy wind slammed into me, the first wind of the night, carrying a smell of damp earth and something metallic. I forced my legs to move, sprinting past the boulder. The figure didn't chase, but turned its head to follow me, the red eyes burning like coals in the dark. The trail behind me rattled with unseen footsteps, matching my frantic pace. Finally, a faint glow appeared ahead of the trailhead's old lantern, left on by another ranger. I pushed myself harder, lungs searing. Ka! Behind me, the growl grew louder, rising to a roar that shook the very air. I burst out of the gorge, collapsing beside the lantern's soft yellow circle. The roar cut off instantly, leaving only the night's natural silence, frogs, insects, distant owls, all back as if nothing had happened. When I dared to look back, the gorge lay quiet under the moon, empty and calm. No footprints, but mine marred the gravel. My radio crackled to life, cheerful chatter from the main station as if it had never failed. I reported only a minor rock slide, too shaken to describe the truth. The other rangers laughed, saying Black Hollow plays tricks after dark. The memory of those red eyes followed me home like a shadow. Some nights, when I close my eyes, I still feel that cold breath against my cheek and hear the low whisper, "Why are you here?" And sometimes, if I drive past the gorge after midnight, I see a tall black shape on the cliff's edge, watching, waiting, its eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Now, I never walk that trail after dark. Some places aren't meant for people. Black Hollow Gorge reminds me of that every time the night falls silent and the wind stops breathing. Story 6, Screams of Pinevale Marsh. Pinevale Marsh lies in a low basin where mist clings year-round, a place most rangers prefer to visit only in daylight. I'd drawn a midnight wildlife check after reports of strange noises spooked nearby campers. The air that night was thick with the smell of wet moss and stagnant water. My boots sank into spongy ground as I followed the boardwalk that snaked through reeds and black pools reflecting a thin crescent moon. The marsh was quieter than usual, the usual frog chorus oddly absent. Only the slow drip of water from dangling branches filled the air. My flashlight beam caught clouds of tiny insects swirling like smoke. Every few steps, the wooden planks creaked loudly, each sound swallowed by the damp night. I tightened my grip on the rail, uneasy but determined to finish the sweep. Halfway across the main stretch, I heard a faint, distant scream. God. It wasn't an animal's cry. God. Sharp and echoing across the fog. I froze, heart hammering. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding small against the endless mist. No reply came, only the gurgle of unseen water. I radioed dispatch, but the channel hissed with static. A quick battery check showed it full. I tried again, more static, then silence. Another scream ripped through the air, closer this time. So real, it vibrated in my chest. It was high and ragged, like someone in terrible pain. I hurried forward, the boardwalk groaning beneath me. The fog thickened until I could barely see my own feet. Shapes seemed to move within its shadows that vanished when I aimed the light. My breathing grew fast and shallow. The scream came again, but now it was joined by others' overlapping voices, men and women, all wailing in a terrible chorus. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, above, below, inside my skull. My flashlight flickered, casting frantic beams across the reeds. I stumbled onto a wider platform where a faded sign warned visitors to stay on the path. Beyond it, black water stretched to the tree line. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving a heavy silence that pressed on my ears. I could hear my heartbeat, rapid and loud. Then a whisper drifted through the mist. "Help us." Soft, pleading, unmistakably human. Cod airing, I turned in a slow circle, light sweeping through fog so thick it felt alive. "Who's there?" I demanded. Marsh answered only with a faint ripple of water. A sudden splash behind me made me spin. Something pale bobbed in the water, just a glimpse before it sank. My pulse thudded painfully as I edged closer. The surface smooth, perfectly still, as if nothing had disturbed it. The whisper came again, right beside my ear. "Down here." I jerked back, nearly dropping the flashlight. No one stood there, only endless gray mist and the smell of rotting vegetation. I turned to retreat, but the boardwalk behind me was gone. Where solid planks had been was now a stretch of dark, rippling water. My stomach dropped. I knew I'd walked a straight path, yet the way back had vanished. The screams erupted again, deafening now, a wall of agony that made my vision blur. Shadows formed in the mist-twisted human shapes, writhing just beyond reach. I stumbled backward until the platform shook beneath me. Something cold and slimy brushed my ankle. I kicked wildly, beam flashing across a pale arm rising from the water, fingers reaching. I lunged to the side, heart racing, as more arms broke the surface gray, water swollen, clawing upward in silence, except for that endless screaming. I bolted toward the far edge, where I thought another boardwalk might be. Miraculously, a narrow path emerged from the fog, slick and shining like wet bone. I sprinted across it, never daring to look down as icy splashes licked at my boots. Behind me, the screams twisted into laughter low, gurgling, echoing through the marsh like a cruel joke. The path seemed to stretch forever, yet somehow I burst through a wall of mist and stumbled onto dry ground near the ranger access road. The laughter stopped instantly. I turned, panting, to see only normal marshland behind me, calm and dark, the boardwalk exactly where it should be. My radio crackled to life with routine chatter, as if nothing had happened. I reported strange noises, but kept the details to myself. Back at the station, older rangers exchanged uneasy looks. One finally muttered that Pinevale was a drowned town, the site of a long-ago flood that took dozens of lives. Some nights, they said, the dead still call out. I patrolled many lonely places, but I avoid the marsh after midnight. Sometimes, when the fog rolls low and the air smells of wet moss, I hear faint screams in the distance, and I know the drowned still wait, whispering for someone to join them beneath the dark water. Story 7, Cabin Beyond Hollow Creek. Hollow Creek winds through a dense stretch of forest where even daylight feels dim. I'd been assigned a late patrol after reports of an illegal campsite past the old footbridge. September night was cold enough that my breath drifted like smoke. Crickets usually sang loudly here, but as I stepped onto the trail, their song cut off, leaving only the distant rush of the creek. Strange stillness settled over the woods, thick and heavy. The trail twisted between black trunks, my flashlight carving a narrow tunnel of light. Every snap of a twig echoed louder than it should have. Half a mile in, I smelled wood smoke, faint but distinct. Someone was camping where they shouldn't. I radioed the station, but the line only hissed with static. Soon, I reached the old wooden footbridge. The planks were damp and slick, the creek gurgling beneath like low laughter. Across the bridge, a pale light flickered between the trees, yellow, warm, inviting. It looked like a lantern or a cabin lamp. No official structure existed out here, at least none marked on our maps. I followed the glow, pushing through damp undergrowth until a small clearing opened before me. There stood a cabin I had never seen before, weathered logs, a sagging porch, yet a bright lamp burned in the single front window. Smoke curled from the crooked chimney, carrying the sharp scent of pine resin. I called out, "Park ranger, anyone inside?" My voice vanished into the still air. No answer came, but I felt watched, as if unseen eyes studied me from the dark beyond the lamplight. The door creaked open an inch. Light spilled onto the porch in a soft golden line. I stepped closer, my boots crunching leaves, and the door eased wider with a slow groan. Inside, the glow revealed a tidy room, a stone hearth with fresh embers, a table set for two with steaming cups. Yet no one was there. A warm draft brushed my face, carrying a faint smell of something sweet, apple cider, maybe. My stomach tightened. The cups on the table trembled slightly, though the air was still. I stepped back, uneasy, and the door swung shut behind me with a loud thud. I lunged for the handle. It wouldn't budge. Panic prickled my skin. "Okay?" I yanked harder, but the knob stayed cold and unyielding. "Okay?" Behind me, the fire crackled louder, flames suddenly high and bright. "Okay?" Shadows danced across the log walls like restless figures. Then I heard it, a low whisper, right beside my ear. "Welcome home." I spun around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. The table's cups now sat empty, steam gone, as if they'd been cold for hours. A floorboard groaned in the corner. Slowly, a tall silhouette emerged from the shadows, featureless, darker than the cabin itself. It moved with a slow, deliberate glide, stopping just beyond the firelight. "Huh." I tried the radio again, but only a harsh crackle answered. The figure tilted its head, the motion strangely inhuman, like a puppet's jerk. My voice cracked as I demanded, "Who are you?" No replying, only the hiss of the fire and the steady creak of the old cabin. The figure stepped closer. I backed away until my shoulders hit the cold door. Its outline shimmered faintly, as if woven from smoke. A whisper filled the room, many voices layered into one. "Stay with us." The lamp in the window flickered out, plunging us into near darkness. Only the fire cast a dim orange glow. The figure's edges blurred, stretching toward me like creeping mist. My skin burned with cold where the shadows touched. Desperate, I slammed my shoulder against the door. This time it flew open and I stumbled onto the porch. The forest beyond was pitch black, no lantern glow, no trail of smoke. Behind me, the cabin door eased shut with a soft click. I turned to shine my light on the structure, only to find empty trees. The clearing was bare, just a carpet of leaves and moonlight. No cabin, no chimney, not even a footprint remained. Heart racing, I ran back toward the footbridge, branches clawing at my jacket. The creek roared louder than before, a sound like muffled voices beneath the water. When I reached the bridge, I glanced back and froze. Through the trees, far beyond the clearing, a single warm light flickered once, then vanished. A faint whisper carried on the breeze, "Come back." I didn't stop running until the ranger station lights came into view. The radio sprang to life, halfway there, crisp and clear, as if nothing had failed. Connor gave a vague report about unauthorized lighting and left out the rest. Sometimes, on foggy nights, I swear I smell apple cider drifting through the woods near Hollow Creek, and if I listen hard, I can hear the creek's rush bending into soft words. Welcome home. Story 8, Shadows on Black Hollow Trail, black hollow trail winds deep into the backcountry. A narrow path, few visitors, attempt after dark. One chilly October night, I was assigned to locate a missing hiker, reported overdue by his family. The sky was a dull silver, clouds swallowing the moon, and the forest smelled of damp earth and pine sap. My headlamp carved a thin cone of light that barely pierced the endless black. The first mile was uneventful, except for the uneasy silence. Normally, owls hooted and small animals rustled in the brush, but that night the woods felt deserted. My own footsteps echoed too loudly. A cold breeze slipped through the trees, raising goosebumps on my arms beneath the ranger jacket. About 2 miles in, I found a torn piece of blue fabric snagged on a branch. It matched the missing hiker's shirt from the photo dispatch sent me. It's heart quickening. I radioed my location, but the line only emitted faint static. I tried twice more. Nothing. I pressed on, the path narrowing between leaning pines that seemed to listen. A sweet metallic smell drifted through the air and something sour. I followed it until I reached a small clearing where the scent hung heavy. The ground there was damp, though no rain had fallen, and faint shapes in the dirt looked like footprints, claw marks. A sudden snap echoed from the trees behind me. I whipped around, light sweeping across the trunks. Nothing, but the hairs on my neck lifted as if someone stood just out of view. My breathing slowed to a careful rhythm. Then I heard a whisper, low, hoarse, impossible to understand, but unmistakably human. It slithered through the trees like smoke. "Hello?" I called, voice trembling. Silence followed, then another whisper, closer this time, almost beside my ear. I spun and caught a flash of movement, a tall shadow darting between the trees. It was too fast for a person, more like a sudden blot of darkness that vanished when my light hit it. I tightened my grip on the flashlight, heart hammering. Further ahead, the trail bent toward an old wooden shelter used by hunters decades ago. Its roof sagged and walls leaned, but a faint light flickered through the gaps. Relief mixed with dread. Maybe the hiker was there. I approached carefully, crunching leaves underfoot. The light inside wavered like a candle. I stepped to the doorless entrance and peered in. Empty. Just rotting planks and the smell of mold. Yet the air shimmered as if heat rose from a fire. A voice whispered from the far corner, "Not yet." The sound chilled me to the bone. I swept my light across the corner. Nothing but shadows. My own breath came out in white puffs. Suddenly, the doorframe groaned. The entire shelter seemed to tilt, wood creaking as if heavy weight pressed down from above. Dust rained from the rafters. I backed out quickly, stumbling on the threshold. Outside, the forest felt wrong, darker, closer. Shapes shifted at the edges of my light, disappearing when I focused. A long sigh drifted through the trees. Not wind, but a slow exhale inches from my neck. I turned sharply and saw eyes. Two dull amber glows hung in the darkness, level with my own. They blinked once, and the shadows around them thickened into a towering outline, taller than any person. Its limbs too long and thin. Before I could react, it stepped forward without sound. The forest seemed to hold its breath. I stumbled backward, fumbling for the radio again. Only static hissed back. The figure tilted its head, a jerky, unnatural motion. Its purse started again. Dozens of voices, layered, repeating something I couldn't quite catch. Sound vibrated in my chest like a distant drum. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure collapsed into the ground, melting into the dirt like spilled ink. The whispers stopped. The woods were silent again, almost gentle. I ran, branches clawing at my arms, not daring to look back. When I finally reached the trailhead, my radio crackled alive with dispatch, asking for an update, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Search teams scoured the area the next day and found no sign of the missing hiker. No fabric scrap, no footprints, not even the shelter. They insisted Black Hollow Trail held nothing but trees and rock. Yet sometimes, when I patrol nearby, I hear faint whispers curling through the pines. If I pause too long, I feel eyes on me from the dark waiting, patient, and always just out of sight. Story 9, Lantern Keeper of Red Elk Gorge. Red Elk Gorge is a steep, twisting canyon where moonlight rarely touches the forest floor. Late one November night, I was asked to check a report of strange lights along the old miner's trail. The cold air smelled of wet stone and pine pitch, and my boots scraped softly against the icy ground as I hiked in. My breath drifted like smoke while distant water trickled through the gorge. The trail narrowed quickly, forcing me to edge along rock walls, slick with moss. No insects buzzed, no owls called. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. A faint yellow glow shimmered far ahead, flickering between tree trunks like a lantern swinging in slow arcs. At first, I thought it might be a lost camper. I radioed dispatch, but the line only answered with static. The light bobbed once, then drifted deeper into the gorge, as if it wanted me to follow. Against every instinct, I did. The air grew colder the farther I went, until each inhale stung my lungs. My flashlight beam barely pierced the dark, but the lantern glow stayed just out of reach. Whenever I quickened my pace, it floated faster, always the same distance away. Finally, the trail opened onto a broad rock shelf overlooking the rushing creek. The yellow light hovered near the edge, steady now, brighter than before, called out, "Park Ranger, do you need help?" The glow paused, then swayed gently side to side, almost like a slow shake of the head. I stepped closer, my boots crunching frost. That's when I noticed something wrong. The lantern had no handle, no holder, just a flame hanging in midair, flickering without wind. My stomach tightened. Sudden metallic clank echoed from below the cliff, like an iron gate slamming shut. The sound vibrated through the rock beneath my feet. The lantern light flared white and shot across the gorge, vanishing into the trees with impossible speed. I stood frozen, heart pounding, when a whisper rose from the creek below. It was deep and rough, like gravel dragged across stone. "Leave, now." The water churned violently, though no wind stirred. I backed toward the trail, scanning the dark. That S when I saw a figure on the far side of the gorge, a tall man holding an old miner lantern. The flame inside black instead of yellow. His eyes reflected the light like two shards of coal. He raised the lantern, and the dark flame pulsed, casting long, jagged shadows that crawled across the rock toward me. The whisper came again, louder, "Leave, or stay forever." I turned and ran, slipping on the frosted stones. The gorge seemed to stretch endlessly, each turn of the trail longer than the last. But behind me, heavy footsteps matched my own, though when I glanced back, nothing followed. The static in my radio suddenly roared to life, screeching like 100 overlapping voices. I ripped the earpiece away, but the noise drilled into my skull. Finally, the trailhead lights appeared through the trees. I burst out of the canyon, gasping as the static ceased instantly. The night air outside the gorge felt strangely warm, almost gentle. Back at the station, other rangers exchanged uneasy looks when I reported strange lights. One older ranger told me locals whisper about a miner who vanished in a cave-in a century ago, said to roam the gorge with a cursed lantern. He warned me never to follow any lone light in Red Elk after dark. "That's how he finds you," he said, voice low. "He doesn't like company, but he loves to trap the curious." The next morning, we hiked back in daylight. There were no footprints, no fresh lantern soot, nothing but smooth rock and silent trees. Still, some nights when I patrol near Red Elk Gorge, I spot a faint yellow glow hovering in the distance. It sways gently, almost inviting, and disappears the moment I step closer. Whenever I see it, I remember that black flame and the gravel voice telling me to leave, okay? And I do without a second glance because I know the lantern keeper is still waiting for someone who does in tea. Story 10, Watchers of Frost Valley, sits at the park's northern edge, where icy winds sweep down from snow-dusted peaks, even in midsummer. My shift began just after midnight, a routine patrol along the ridge trail to check for stray campers. The sky was clear and sharp with stars, but the forest below lay in absolute darkness, the kind that swallows every sound. The trail wound between boulders rhymed with thin frost. My boots crunched softly, echoing off the canyon walls. Normally, I enjoyed the quiet, but that night it felt wrong to still, as if the valley itself was listening. I tightened my jacket and pushed on. Half a mile in, I noticed fresh tracks in the thin crust of snow. Bare footprints, human. They led off the trail and down toward the valley floor. My breath caught in the cold air. Whoever made them was walking barefoot in sub-freezing temperatures. I radioed the station, but static hissed back. I checked the antenna, perfectly fine. The silence in my headset pressed against my ears like a weight. With a sigh, I followed the prints, telling myself someone might need help. The tracks wound through twisted pines and patches of brittle grass, always fresh, never filling with drifting frost. As I descended, a faint hum reached me, low and rhythmic, like a deep chord from an unseen instrument. It vibrated in my chest more than my ears. At the valley floor, the sound grew stronger. I stepped into a wide clearing, dusted with silver frost. In the center stood a circle of tall stones I'd never seen marked on any map. Moonlight painted them pale, and frost crystals glittered like tiny stars. Inside the stone circle, 5 figures stood motionless. Their skin was pale as the frost, their eyes dark hollows. They were barefoot and lightly dressed, despite the bitter cold. I whispered a greeting, but none reacted. The humming pulsed from them, though their lips never moved. My flashlight flickered, and the temperature dropped sharply. Breath misted thick around me, as if the air had turned liquid. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The figures swayed in unison, slow and deliberate, their eyes fixed somewhere far beyond me. Suddenly, the hum stopped. The clearing fell silent, except for the creak of frozen branches. One figure tilted its head toward me, and a soundless pressure filled my skull, like a thought that wasn't mine. "Join us." I stumbled back, pulse hammering. The figures moved as one, gliding forward without lifting their feet. Frost bloomed across the ground in their wake, spreading toward me like living veins of ice. I turned and ran, crunching through snow that suddenly felt waist-deep, though the clearing had been flat. The humming returned, louder, now inside my chest, like a second heartbeat. Branches clawed at my jacket as I scrambled uphill. Behind me, I heard soft footsteps, many perfectly in sync. I dared a glance back and saw them emerging from the trees, still gliding, eyes glowing faintly silver. The trail seemed endless. My legs burned, lungs aching in the frigid air. Yet, no matter how fast I moved, the humming stayed close, an unbroken drone vibrating through the rocks. At last, faint lights of the ranger station flickered ahead. I burst from the tree line onto the gravel road. Instantly, the humming ceased. I spun around, nothing but empty forest, still and silent under the stars. Back inside the warm station, my radio crackled to life as if it had never failed. Dispatch asked for routine update. I muttered something about false alarm and locked the door behind me. The next morning, I returned with 2 other rangers. We found no stone circle, no footprints, just untouched snow and ordinary trees. They teased me gently about midnight ghosts, but I knew what I'd seen. For weeks afterward, I dreamed of the figures, okay, their hollow eyes fixed on me, their silent message repeating, "Join us." I'd wake, shivering, ears ringing with that low, endless hum. Even now, on quiet winter nights, the wind through Frost Valley sometimes carries a strange vibrational low, deep, almost like a hidden song. When I hear it, I feel the pull to go back, but I never do, 'cause I know those watchers are waiting, patient and still, for the night I finally return and step inside their frozen circle, okay? And if I ever do, I'm certain I won't come back out.